We might be on introduction part 37. We don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
No, we can't do that. Bisexual lighting.
You're listening and you have thoughts and you want to share them with us. And we love that.
Oh, sure. Put me on the spot. Why don't you?
Susie sells seashells by the seashore.
No, she doesn't.
Because it's going to be great. And I think you're going to enjoy the heck out of it. Welcome, everybody, to Write Out Loud, the podcast about writing, storytelling, and becoming the best author version of yourself you could be. I don't know if we can deliver on that last part, but we're going to try. We're going to try really hard. Let me introduce, of course, myself, Matt Kassem, your co-host, as it is, every single week. And as always, we have our lovely, beautiful, and amazing Christina. Hello.
Hello.
And today, you guys are in for a treat. We actually have a very special guest with us. This is Big Robb from Chewing the Fat podcast. And Rob is here to kind of talk with us a little bit about a very special topic. But before we get to that, let me say hello, Rob.
Hello, Matt. Hello, Tina. How are you guys doing?
Well, doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for asking me to be here.
Yes, I am super stoked you're here. And, for those folks just kind of hanging out in the wings listening, tell us about yourself.
I am a creative-minded type person. I host a podcast called Chewing the Fat. If you're not sure exactly what that means, that's just a Southern colloquialism for having a conversation. So,
Nice.
I interview people from all walks of life. And the crux of the podcast is around mental health. I believe everybody struggles at some point through their day with, or in their life with, whether it be depression, anxiety, those days you don't want to get out of bed, those days you just want to stand in the shower and let the hot water hit you, because you just don't feel like doing anything else. And the more we have conversations about that, the more it does take away that stigma. It takes the power away from depression, because depression wants to tell you you're alone. You're the only one that feels like this. And when you realize there are other people that have those days, it makes the burden a little bit easier. It makes the day just a little bit brighter. So I interview folks that I've met throughout my life, people that I may follow on social media, from Broadway stars, television actors, to folks that work at your local retail store. Everybody has those kind of things. So I like to lay out that common ground. You find out interesting things about people and also how they deal with those days. And then we have a little fun too. We play a little game at the end of the podcast that I call Fast Five, where it's just 5 random questions, no wrong answers. So it's fun. But I've been doing that for about 3 years now. You can find me on any of the, where you're listening to this podcast or any other podcast place out there. You can find it, or on the website at chewingthefatbr.com. But I started the podcast because of those days that I was having. It was the blip. It was, it was the time of COVID, and it started to weigh on me. My background prior to starting the podcast was in television and radio. And so I probably for a year prior to actually launching the podcast started the process of wanting to do the podcast and needing to get these things out. But depression was getting at me. It was like, well, you can't do that. Nobody wants to listen to you talk. Nobody wants to, even though I, worked at radio stations all across the country and done voice work in television commercials and radio and things like that. It's like, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. Nobody cares. And so I put these hurdles in front of myself of perfectionism. It's like, I've got to, have the perfect microphone. I've got to have the perfect podcast art. I've got to have the perfect format and the perfect guest and all of these things. And it took a good friend of mine, Travis Brown, to basically kick me in the ass and say, look, if you don't put something out, no one's going to hear the message. and you don't know who needs to hear that message if
Yeah.
you don't ever say it. So,
Yeah.
so I was
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm hitting the big red button. I'm recording. I'm putting something out there. And after I did that, there was so much just like, why did I wait a year to do this? It was just
Yeah. Yeah.
such a release. So, but yeah,
You
that,
know, I got to tell you, Rob, that right there is just so important that I have to put you on pause
Mm.
because everyone needs to hear this. Everyone needs to, all of these authors have that same voice in the head saying, what makes you think you can write a book? What makes you think you have a
Mhm.
story to tell? What makes you think anybody's going to read your story? What makes you think, any of those things? And in my industry, I'm sure you've heard this before, Rob, too. Start where you are.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if you have the best microphone. It doesn't matter if you have the best computer to write your novel.
Yeah.
It is start where you are, because once you start, that's it. It's like, that voice
Mhm.
stops, that voice has nowhere to go.
Yep.
Yeah, this is exactly why I wanted you on the podcast, because this is
Yes.
exactly where writers are coming from all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was that first experience doing it? What happened after you started?
Well, the first experience, my friend challenged me. He's like, do something today. He's like, I don't care what it is. I don't care how long it is, you know, hit the record button. And just basically it was me saying what I just told you folks. You know what I mean? That it was like, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm starting. This is the beginning. And there was such a weight lifted from me because I hit record and I put it up on, where the podcast goes so that people can find it. And then people reached out. I was like, I can't wait to hear more. I can't wait to hear more. People reaching out and say, can I be a guest on the show? I've got something I've got to say, that I want to say. And then it just kind of kept going from there. It was so easy to use the skills that I already had to talk to people, to interview people, and people really trusted me with their stories. I mentioned in the description of the podcast is like, we tell beautiful, messy human stories.
Mhm.
That's the thing is, as you are writing the book of your life, sometimes you end up in these dark places. Sometimes you end up in these places that you didn't think that you were going to, but there's always another line. There's another sentence. There's another paragraph. There's another chapter. You just got to keep writing, keep moving forward, keep living. And so people trusted me to help them tell their stories.
Well, I think that's part of what we talked about in this is having you on is perfect because the work that you do and the stories that you tell, the conversations that you have, right? And the reason people trust you all stem from the fact that you are a genuine person. You are a very caring, empathetic person,
Mm.
and that people relate to you, right? They relate to the stories that you tell, the stories that your guests tell. They relate to everything that goes through. And again, we talked about the fact that we wanted to connect this to you are not alone.
Yeah.
Right. And really drive that point home that there are going to be days when you don't want to pick up that pen or type on that keyboard.
Yeah.
Or talk into that recorder, right? Like there are going to be days because you just don't have the mental bandwidth for whatever reason to do it.
Mhm.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through that. Everybody. So what do you think, like from a creativity standpoint, right? People struggle sometimes because they are in that mind space. What are some of the things like just for you that you have done to kind of also get yourself out of that? I mean, you described how you started the podcast that way,
Yeah.
but like, days when you're just kind of creatively stuck, how do you work yourself up?
I think for me to get past some of those kind of blocks and those stagnant points, I have to focus on something else. Maybe I read something from an author that I admire, or maybe maybe it's just something simple as watching a comfort show. You know what I mean? Veg out, grab some, popcorn, potato chips, and just watch something that is mindless, but I can focus on because it takes me away from whatever I was stuck on. And then there's something within that dialogue of that movie or a phrase in a book that kind of sparks that creativity, becomes the muse, so that I can then continue on whatever it is, or just shifting gears completely to something else. This was kind of also in the time of the second phase of COVID. I started taking a pottery class as someone who I'm an actor. I'm a voice actor. I sing. I perform on stage. I have things that I can create that are non-tangible. And so, something like a podcast, it's not tangible. You can't hold a podcast. I mean, you hold your phone, but you don't hold the podcast. So I have always admired people that can create something with their hands, something tangible, whether it be woodworkers, potters, painters. Just, I cannot figure out painters. I can manipulate a digital image, but I cannot create something original. So I took a pottery class, and there was something, again, that just switched my mind to a completely different set of skills. I understood what was supposed to happen, mentally, what was supposed to happen, because I was a science nerd in school. And I'm like, all right, I'm working with the clay and the centripetal force, and I need to, do this, that, and the other. But I couldn't make my hands do the thing. So it was the most frustrating yet rewarding thing I'd ever done in that first class. The instructor was like, hey, what'd you think of it? I was like, this sucks. He's like, oh my gosh. No. I was like, no, I'm coming back because I'm going to get this. I'm not going to let it be. So changing gears to something completely different mode of creativity was very freeing, very zen, and very allowed me to focus on something else. That also then, once I was done with that, I was like, oh, these other neurons started firing for other things. So that's one of the things that that I do if I start to get stuck. Okay, what else can I do? So I have a huge collection of Legos now as well, just for a different type of outlet. That's something for me, physical, something that's tangible that I can put my hands on, that I've worked with. Because otherwise, all the stuff that I do is all audio based or, video based, where you can't really hold it. So having something that is in the real world that I can say, here's the progress I've come along on that, or here's the thing that I finished, allows me to, have a different type of focus and to look away from what's blocking me.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's interesting, because I had something similar when I started editing. I knew I wanted to add a component to it because I could see that something was missing, and it was that creativity and mental health issues. And so I also am not an artist that works with my hands. And I went a paint and sip by myself, which Matt knows I don't do anything by myself. But the one goal that I had, there was, I alleviated myself of any pressure. I knew going in, my art teachers in school were pat me on the head and send me on my way. You got your, passing grade in art.
Right.
So I went with the intention of just being free.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because I ended up sitting next to a girl who had that perfectionist bug. And she was not enjoying herself. And I thought to myself, it doesn't matter what I produce. It doesn't matter how good or bad I am. Am I being creative? Am I having fun? Am I opening myself up to something, to enjoyment?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of writers struggle with being perfect, with being, okay, I got to hit bestseller list. I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And really all they have to do is connect with an audience.
Yeah.
Once they connect with an audience, then they connect with another audience, because what happens to that audience that they're connecting with, that person goes to their friend and says, oh my gosh, I just read this book and I, really connected with it. And so I think it's so important to go and do something that you wouldn't normally do creatively.
Yep.
You with the pottery, I've always wanted to do pottery. That's my next. I've conquered paintings. I have 5 or 6 paintings around the house. I love it. I'm terrible.
Yeah.
I don't do anything with the artwork except for look at it for myself. But there's this element of, freedom that came with it, that when I came back to my other work, I was much more open. I was much more, creativity, daydreaming. I mean, like all of that stuff just opened right up.
Yeah, you
Opened right up.
created other neural pathways that weren't there previously just by
Yeah.
expanding, the parts of the brain that you use. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's funny, we're talking about this again in the vein of you're not alone. I was reading an article from NPR, and Rachel Martin does a segment called Enlighten Me. And Rachel was interviewing Rishikesh Hirway, who is the host of Song Exploder, super, super popular podcast where they basically take a song and they sit with the actual person who wrote and created the song and, did the song. And they break it all down, right? They break it down to like its little bits and even the creative process around it, how they got to the lyrics they got and the sounds they used and all that. And the title of this particular article was, he was quote unquote creatively dead. Then he harnessed the power of boredom. So it aligns very much with what you're saying, right? He says in here, Song Exploder came out of a time in my life when I felt the opposite of that. I felt creatively dead, I'd say. People call it writer's block. That's what I called it for a long time. And then he kind of goes on to say the reason, what he came to realize now was that it was really about judgment. The reason I wasn't able to make anything was because I was just in this whirlpool of self-judgment. I was sort of telling myself stories about my own worth as an artist or lack thereof. And so I kind of put the music aside for a while, because he used to be, and still is, but he used to be focused solely on making music before Song Exploder became a thing. And he said essentially like he just, had this big kind of rise in his music career, and then it just sort of stalled. And he just put it aside for a second, started doing Song Exploder as that distraction and a little kind of like side hobby. And it just ended up taking a lot of his time and ended up reinforcing, that the judgment that he had for himself wasn't really true.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah. Right. So it's just interesting, like people like that who have even this podcast and this career that are so stellar have all gone through the same thing. This is all a human condition, right? That we all deal with. So I think it's really, really fascinating that it ties that together so well.
Yeah. And that I'm going to segue into what you call your second segment, Rob.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what your second segment is and where that came from?
Yeah. So the way, again, that perfectionist, that radio background, I mean, I wanted to structure my show in a way that was comfortable for me, that I could record. It makes it easy for me to not have to do a whole lot of editing because we're just talking. It's a conversation. The first part is where we're getting to know whoever I'm talking about, getting their background. What are they into? What were they into in high school? That kind of stuff. Where are they at now? What brings them joy? That type of thing. And then our second segment is what the podcast was created for. That's the mental health segment. And it talks about those days that we all have. And I ask every person the question, how do you keep the darkness at bay? And that came from actually J.R.R. Tolkien in Lord of the Rings. It was a line that Gandalf delivered. The line was, I found it is the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. And it just resonated with me because that's what I was feeling.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel this darkness. How can I keep it at bay? And it's through those small acts of kindness and love. We can, choose to be anything throughout the day. And there's those signs. It's like, if you can be anything, be kind. It doesn't cost anything to be kind. Well, it also doesn't cost anything to be an asshole either. But if you have the choice, be kind. And that's something that I genuinely, try to do in all of my interactions with anybody, whether it be family, coworkers, strangers, to try to be kind, because in my background, I've always been the fat kid. I was the fat kid growing up. I was picked on. I'm the fat guy now. But I learned to own that. You can't hurt me with the word fat guy because I already own it. I took the power away from it. So I know what it feels like to be made fun of, to be hurt. And I don't want other people to feel that. So I try to move through the world in kindness and try and do small acts of kindness and small acts of love. And that's what the second segment of the podcast is about. How are you managing the dark days that you have? Sometimes I've had guests and they're like, sometimes I just sit in it. I literally sit in the dark. And that's okay if that's how you have to deal with it, if you have to process it. Every day is not sunshine and roses. And if it takes you sitting in it to process that, then that's what you need to do. But understand you can't stay in it. And that's what they say. They're like, I sit in it with, maybe a day, and the next day comes around and then I'm moving forward. I'm not, just swimming in the mire. Sometimes people say, well, I have a confidant, I have a friend that I can reach out to when I have those days. There are other people that find other creative, outlets. They find a way to focus on something else. Maybe it is writing, maybe it's journaling, and just writing out those raw feelings. And it kind of expunges it. It allows you to not keep it inside. What's inside, you get it out, and now it's over here on the paper.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that second segment is. It's what the podcast was built around, but it's in a way that it's digestible for people that are looking for that, for ideas and ways that they can move through whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you just said there too. I think in today's world, for some reason, we don't want to feel our feelings.
Yeah.
We don't want to feel those things, so we tamp them down.
Mm-hmm.
And by tamping them down, we're not actually processing them.
Mm-hmm.
We're not moving through it. We are, well, I'll save that for later. And then all of a sudden later is, so overwhelming that you can't deal with all of this stuff. So if we were more able to recognize what it is that we're feeling. I really love the answer that the one person gave of just, I let myself sit in it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we do need to allow ourselves to sit in whatever it is that we're feeling. Just being able to acknowledge, I am feeling sad.
Mm-hmm.
I am feeling depressed. I am feeling angry.
Mm-hmm.
I am feeling upset.
Yeah.
We don't allow ourselves to feel those things anymore.
Yeah.
And I think in turn, if we're not allowing ourselves to feel the bad stuff, how do we let the good stuff in?
Yeah.
How do we let in the joy? How do we let in the happiness, just the stuff that we really want to feel?
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, how often were we told as kids coming up, stop crying.
Yeah.
Don't get mad.
Yes.
Don't be mad.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, get over it.
Mm-hmm.
Stop being like that. Like it's not what you did is not, or what they did to you is not that big a deal. Just shrug it off. Like you're kind of told and taught, right, that these sort of more negative, quote unquote, feelings need to be brushed aside or need to be swept under the rug, or you need to just get over it versus, nobody ever says to you too, like if you are happy, they're like, there you go. See, now you're happy. Good job.
Right.
Good job. Right. They don't really reinforce that part either.
Right.
So by sort of by extension, it's like, well, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to feel anything. We're just supposed to be very stoic.
Yeah.
And
It's flat
Yeah.
line, I mean, and that's the thing is, life is peaks and valleys, I mean, they're going to come. They're going to be those there's going to be those, those mesas where everything's kind of flat for a while as well. But, sometimes you got to make your own peak. Sometimes sometimes trying to make a peak, you end up making a valley, but as long as you can keep moving, and I think that's the important thing, like they said, yeah, I have to sit in it, but I'm not staying in it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I don't know who to attribute this to. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember what the actual quote was, but it was actually about you have to have darkness in order to see the stars. So, sometimes, when we feel those things, if we allow ourselves those moments of, like you said, sitting in it, we can begin to recognize when we're feeling that way and maybe get to it quicker. Not question so much, I don't want to feel this right now. Let's tamp it down.
Right.
I think, again, I have to say in today's world, more so than it was, even pre-pandemic, I think the pandemic did something to us But I also think it ignited something in us because I think many more people are talking about mental health in a way that they weren't pre-pandemic.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think,
100%.
when we're talking about folks that are feeling away and they, one of the great discovery questions of the world that we were all had as a child is why. You can find
Yeah.
out so much about what's going on with yourself if you're honest with yourself and you just ask why. It's like, I'm so angry. Well, why am I angry? Well, because they did this thing. Well, why did they do this thing? Why does it upset you that much that they did this thing? It's a great question of discovery. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it helps
Another
you
kind
get
of
to
version of that, though, too, is why would a reasonable person do what they did?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It sort of helps you frame their actions. If it's something that somebody visited upon you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like helps sort of frame their actions in a little bit more, I don't want to say positive, but a little more neutral way, maybe
Mm-hmm.
objective way.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Tina, I cut you off.
No. That's okay. I was just going to say, if we don't ask the why, we don't get to the root of it.
Yeah.
And you can't solve anything unless you know exactly what the root of it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that we can solve, all of our dark days.
Right.
But if we begin to solve each one individually towards what they are, I think you move through it that much faster.
Eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, truth.
Yep.
Don't
Yeah.
try to solve, for, 40 years of bad stuff. Just start today, hit the record button, get the pen, start
Yeah.
today and move forward one day at a time. Just tackle one problem at a time, and eventually you've completed that. You've worked through that other stuff,
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a question that I know we had in mind for you, which was, based on that second segment of yours, what would you say is the most surprising what was the most surprising response you've ever had to that question?
Well, I mean, I've had some people that have said, well, I don't really have, dark days. I'm, generally a happy person. And I'm like, okay, I mean, being a generally happy person doesn't mean that you don't necessarily have dark days. And if your response to that is that, I don't let it bother me. Okay. At least that's an answer. It's like you realize that you did have a day, but you're the type of person that you're not going to internalize that. I feel like those super creative souls out there, the writers, actors, people in that type of world, you have to draw on so many different emotions to be able to create whatever it is you put out into the world. Whether it's a character on stage that is going through something, you have to draw some of that from yourself, from your previous personal experience. When you're writing character arcs, you have to have that come from someplace. You're not just coming out like, throwing a dart on the board and like, oh, what's you had purple toes. What, it's like, those you have to draw from somewhere and understand that it is a process. It's a tool for you to use but it's not something for you to, again, stay in. I think of like, Daniel Day-Lewis as a phenomenal actor, but very method. And people have talked about how horrendous it is to work with him on set because he's Billy the Butcher and you have to refer to him as that. And he's, walking around with his cleaver and it's like, okay, cool. You put out some great work, but you're sitting on my cell phone and I just need you to stand up. I don't need you to say, what's a cell phone? I just need you to stand up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So just being able to say, hey, yeah, that, I have days and I don't let them bother me. That was a surprising thought. The first time I heard somebody say that they just kind of sit in it, they just have to sit in that darkness for a day or so. But, but they always said it wasn't with the intention of staying in there, but looking at face to face and then moving through it. That was surprising to me because, again, my way that I react to those days, like I said, I mean, maybe I do stand in stand in the shower and let the hot water hit me till hopefully my flesh falls off the bones. But, for them to say, yeah, no, I just sit in it. And then I've had my cathartic time and I've moved past it. So that was really surprising to me.
Yeah.
There are, like I said, talking to confidants, whether it be a professional. Again, I am not a professional anything. So getting professional help, there's a place for that. Getting medical help, if you need something, maybe there is a chemistry that is off in your system that causes you to think these ways. There's medicine that's out there that can help you. I am not a person to say that no method can help, because it's all dependent upon the person, and everybody needs a different way to get through these things, and they're all valid ways to get through this stuff. So whether you need the medicine, when you need to see a doctor, you need to talk to a therapist, or just talk to a best friend, or talk to the voice memo on your phone, again, just to get the stuff out. You never know. And then listen to it back to hear, like, hey, what was I saying? Why, and then you just kind of interview yourself to figure that out. I think they're all valid ways to get through this stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. And that there is a way through it.
Yeah.
No matter what. It's just a matter of finding the option that's right for you. Something that we like to say here at this podcast that came from my author coaching and editing is there's always a door number 3.
Yeah.
There's always a way that you haven't heard of, that you haven't thought of, that is new to you, that may work.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too.
Yeah. Maybe you got to try door number 1 and door number 2, and before you hit door number 3. There might be a 4, 5, 6 that you got to try.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be right for you,
Yep.
So I definitely think not giving up is
100%
the way to, seriously, don't give up.
Yeah.
There is a way that can help. You just haven't found it yet.
It's all about tools. Right. And you were just talking about the different tools you can avail yourself of, that might be talking to people, that might be writing things down in a journal, that might be asking yourself those questions. Right. I was listening to a podcast, the Stories RPG podcast, and they were interviewing Steph Campbell, who created and runs trpgkids.com. And one of the things that really kind of resonated, because Steph also teaches at a college level, I believe. And in that, what Steph does is has their students actually write down in a journal their progress as themselves as a character. So they're taking like a third person point of view, right? And talking about like, okay, this is where this person is today. This is how they felt today. And this is, one of the things they really want to focus on, building this skill. And this is what they're going to do about it. And kind of getting a different perspective of it, right? Taking yourself a little bit out of it. It's almost, it is a very mindfulness approach. I think, because when you think about meditation, it's very much the same way. You're trying to take yourself out of it a little bit so you can sort of just observe. But I think it's all about the tools, right? Whether that one works for you. I just think there's so many things that you can try. But the biggest piece of this that we're trying to just impress is you're not alone.
Yep.
This is all very natural. You are going to go through this. There's going to be people around you going through it. Talk about it.
Yeah.
In your own way, whatever that is.
And
talk about it.
And one of the things that, I try to, tell my guests and talk to my guests about is that, you've made it through every hardest day you've ever had already. You're going to make it through this one too.
Yeah.
It's not more than you could do. Because at that time, I can think back to times in my life where I was sleeping in my car because I was working 5 jobs, and I was just moving from job to job to job to try and support my family, and didn't have enough money because I was working out of town, didn't have enough money for a hotel room. So I'm sleeping in my car. And I'm like, what am I doing? I had to hawk a piece of equipment that was in my truck to buy gas to get home, working 5 jobs. And I was like, this is, I felt so much like giving up, so much like giving up. But I made it through that. I didn't give up. I made it through that. And, at that time, I was like, this is the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. This is the hardest thing. But you're going to get through it. You made it through all of those other hard moments. You're going to get through these hard moments too. And we can get through it together. No, whether you reach out to me specifically, Matt or Tina, or you reach out to whoever, or just the fact that that you're going to get through it, that there are other people that have also gotten through these things. You can get through it too.
Yes, 100%. You will make it.
Yep.
You will. Simple.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't give up. You quoted Gandalf in your question that you asked.
Yep.
I'm going to quote Thomas Wayne when he asks Bruce, "Why do we fall?" So we can practice getting back up again.
Mm-hmm.
I probably butchered it a little bit, but you get the idea. The context is there. And not exactly a quote, but hey, it works. But the idea is like, you've got to keep fighting.
Yeah.
Because the world is more interesting with you in it.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
You have those stories to tell. You're the only one that can write those stories. And I'm just talking about the story of your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not just the stories that you're actually putting on paper. You know what I mean? The story of your life is specifically yours. And it is amazing. And the chapters that we don't even realize yet are going to be phenomenal. I get told all the time by my friend who kicked me in the ass to get the podcast going. He's like, your biggest fans haven't discovered you yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Each podcast that I put out, it's out into the world. And it will find its audience. It will find the people that need to listen to it when they need to listen to it to get whatever inspiration or whatever it is. It's about putting it out there. It's not about, for me, it's not about, I got to hit a number, or I got to blah, blah, blah. That, for me, that perfectionist part is gone. It's about putting the message out whenever it works. There are days that I don't feel like podcasting. There are days that, a guest cancels on me and I'm like, son of a, and what am I, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I may just not put out an episode that week, or maybe I hit record and I talk for 2 or 3 minutes about something that's more personal to me. And I release, every once in a while, I release these, I call them bite-sized episodes, because it's just a short rambling of mine. But it's putting it out there. It's like, okay, the story changed, but I'm still going to write it. I'm still going to go ahead and put something out there, because there's somebody out there that might need to hear this particular thing. There's somebody out there that needs to hear this podcast right now, and they're going to find it, and they're going to find some inspiration from it.
I think even if we challenge you as a writer, right? If you're out there and you're thinking to yourself, gosh, I can't do this, or I shouldn't be doing this, or I'm not good at this, I can't do it. Whatever those thoughts are, right? Put them aside. Think about it from this perspective. Whatever story you have to tell might be the thing that helps you through that darkness.
Mm-hmm.
The story that you tell might be something that touches someone else and helps them through that darkness. And that's a lot to put on you. So I don't mean to do that. Just let it happen by natural, just natural happening, right? It just happens. You're not doing it for that purpose, but know that somewhere, someone might resonate with your words.
Yeah. What I often tell my writers, the story that you are longing to tell, someone else is longing to hear.
Yep.
And only you can tell it in the way, from your own experiences, from your own background, through your own rose-colored glasses, that person is going to receive that, And like I said, for me, writing is all about connecting. It's connecting with yourself, connecting with the audience, connecting with a story, connecting with an idea that needs to be out there. Rob, you were talking about, you have things you need to tell. You have a message, and that's exactly what writers, they have a message. And the thing is, you don't even think about, what is my message to the world? All you have to think about is, what do I want to say?
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to say? Because somebody out there needs to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think there's a
Absolutely.
lot of pressure in that, again, that we put on ourselves for, oh, it's got to be formatted properly. And it's like, oh, and what's the tone? What's this character arc or whatever? Maybe that's the opportunity you have to dive deeper inside and just, write some prose. Just write, that free form writing, exercise that we had to do in every English lit class. It was like, you just write, what is it? Stream of consciousness writing. Just write.
Mhm.
Just write a page. Doesn't matter what it's about, bibbly bobbly, but whatever, just write something. And
Mhm.
then look back at that, maybe that's something that becomes hey, not that it's advertising or anything, but just a post on your Instagram. Maybe you just take it and
Mhm.
you just take a phrase that happened to come out of that and you put it on your Instagram, or you put it on your, wherever that you put stuff out for people to find. And that then becomes something that somebody needed to see at that moment because you opened yourself up to just letting it out, letting that stuff that's inside out in a very natural way. And then, yes, you may take that and you take another piece on another page and another piece on another page. And then now you've got a different story that, pieces of a story that inspires you to write something more proper and formatted,
Yeah. Yep. It's all about connection.
Yep.
Connecting with others, connecting with your thoughts, your ideas,
Mhm.
and putting those things out into the world. And I am glad that we got to connect today, Rob.
Me too. Thank you so much for
I think
asking me
it's-
to do this.
Yes, it's fantastic. And I think, we've gotten to really kind of dive deep on this one, and it was worth it every single second, because I think it's something that we have to get good at talking about.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about it in places we don't expect to talk about it. You probably picked this podcast to listen to because you thought this was going to be how you learn to be a better writer. And guess what? You were right. Except this way we're going to talk about it is through the mental health aspect of that, right? Which is a big, big, big part of it. So thank you again from the bottom of our hearts. We appreciate that you're here, Rob. And Tina, thank you so much, as always.
Well,
Oh, yes.
before you let me go, thank you so
Yeah.
much for the invite. And let me say this to your listeners. If you are listening to this podcast, obviously you are, because I just said that and you're listening. So there you go. Please take the moment to give this podcast a 5-star review and write a review on whatever platform you're listening at. Believe me, it means so much to us podcasters that you appreciate the work that goes into this. And it doesn't cost you a thing for a 5-star rating or to write a review, but it helps other people find this. When I talk about the soldiers going out into the world, when we create these things to find their audience, you taking the time to share a post, to write a review, to give a 5-star rating, lets other people find it. And this is a very worthwhile podcast. I believe in both of these folks that I'm looking at, that you can't tell I'm looking at right now, and what they are doing for the writing community and for the community of just humans at large. So please take a moment wherever you're at and give them a review. I know they will appreciate it, and I will too.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
And
thanks,
just
Rob.
remind everybody, where can they find more of you, Rob?
Well, you can find my website, chewingthefatbr.com, and then anywhere you get your podcast, wherever you're listening now, you can search for Chewing the Fat with Big Robb or Chewing the Fat, and you can find me there. I'm on Instagram, Chewing the Fat BR. All of the places you can usually find me, Chewing the Fat BR. And BR stands for Big Robb because that's just how it worked. So, but please, yeah, if you have a chance, take a listen. If you like, great. Tell someone. If you don't, tell me.
Love it. I love it. And you will absolutely thoroughly enjoy the conversations that Rob has on his podcast, Chewing the Fat with Big Rob. So thank you again. Thank you both. Appreciate you. Love you both.
Love you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. We really hope that you're enjoying every bit of it, but we would love to hear your feedback. Drop us an email either to matt@writeoutloudpod.com or Christina at bookmatchmaker.com. We would love to hear your thoughts. What's working, what's not working, and what do you want to hear more of? Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.